The crimson stream didn't splash, it poured, deliberate and cruel, at exactly 4:15 that Friday afternoon. My older sister Vanessa didn't stumble. She didn't fumble her glass. She tilted it with the practiced precision of someone who'd been destroying things her entire life. Watching the dark liquid cascade over my 7-year-old son Marcus's artwork like she was watering a plant. Marcus had spent 4 days on that watercolor, a gift for his grandfather's birthday, sweeping view of the mountain lake behind our family's vacation home. He'd mixed colors carefully, layered the sky, painted tiny pine trees along the shoreline. Now Merlot bled through every brushstroke, turning his masterpiece into a crimson-soaked disaster. "He should learn that effort doesn't guarantee reward," Vanessa announced. Her words slightly slurred, but her posture immaculate. "The world doesn't care about his little projects. They're clutter." She set her empty glass down directly on the ruined painting, the wet thud echoing through the suddenly silent room. My Uncle Robert, sprawled on the leather couch, let out a sharp bark of laughter. "That's a $100 tuition payment, kid," he said, grinning. "Life's not fair. Get used to it." The laughter spread like contamination. My mother Patricia chuckled nervously, her eyes darting around the room, desperate to smooth over the jagged edges of the moment. My cousin Emily smirked into her phone. Marcus didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the destruction, his small hands gripping the edge of the oak table until his knuckles turned white. "Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. I'd love to know who's joining us tonight." I didn't scream. I didn't grab napkins. I didn't rush to salvage anything. For what felt like an eternity, I simply watched my son. Marcus didn't cry out. His shoulders trembled violently. His face flushed a deep, mottled red. But he bit down on his lower lip until it paled, physically compressing himself into his chair. He was trying to become invisible, the same survival instinct I'd perfected over 34 years. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for the exit. He was waiting for the predators to lose interest, hoping that stillness would make him invisible. And in that awful silence, I recognized the chain. It was the same invisible shackle I'd worn since childhood, the one that taught me to be small, to be convenient, to swallow my rage so I didn't disrupt the fragile peace. I was watching my son learn the fawning response in real time, learning that his humiliation was entertainment for the people who should have protected him. Learning that his job was to smile through the pain so the adults could maintain their comfortable delusions. He was learning to be me. The realization struck like ice water. I wasn't just watching him get bullied, I was watching him inherit my trauma. I was passing down a legacy of silence, a generational curse of people-pleasing and separation. If I didn't break that chain in this exact moment, he would carry it forever. He would grow up apologizing for existing. I looked at my father, Thomas. He sat at the head of the table, his hands folded over his empty dinner plate. His face was a mask of granite, unreadable to anyone who didn't know him intimately. But I knew him. I noticed the white-knuckled grip on his fork. I saw the muscle twitching in his jaw. The atmosphere in the cabin grew electric, heavy with decades of unspoken resentment. I stood up. The chair scraped against the wooden floor like a scream, cutting through the laughter with brutal finality. I didn't reach for a towel. I didn't try to fix anything. I walked around the table and positioned myself directly between Vanessa and Marcus, using my body as a shield. I didn't look at the wine stain. I looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I felt no urge to de-escalate. No need to smooth things over. No desperate impulse to crack a joke and restore the illusion of harmony. What I felt was colder than rage. It was the stillness of a final accounting. I was finished paying interest on a debt I never incurred. "You enjoyed that?" I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was flat, clinical, devoid of the trembling I'd felt my entire life. "You enjoyed watching a 7-year-old create something beautiful, and you enjoyed destroying it." Vanessa rolled her eyes. reaching for the wine bottle again, her movements loose with arrogance. "Oh, please, Cassandra, don't be so theatrical. It's paper. I did him a favor. Now he can focus on something productive instead of making messes." "Productive," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. The room went deathly silent. Vanessa's smirk faltered, her glass pausing midway to her lips. My mother gasped, sharp intake of breath that signaled the beginning of her familiar panic routine. I didn't blink. I wasn't the mediator anymore, the one who kept the peace at her own expense. I was a mother watching a predator, and I was finished negotiating. I glanced at my father again. He hadn't moved, but his focus had shifted from the table to me. His eyes sharp and watchful. Before I could speak again, my mother Patricia rushed forward, but not toward Marcus. She didn't kneel beside her crying grandson. Instead, she grabbed a fistful of paper towels and began frantically dabbing at the wine-soaked table. "Oh, Vanessa, you're so careless," she chirped, her voice high and brittle, vibrating with frantic energy. She scrubbed at the wood grain, completely ignoring the ruined painting. "Cassandra, don't make that face. It was an accident. We'll buy him a new art set, a really nice one, with the good brushes." She looked up at us, her smile stretched too tight, her eyes pleading desperately. "Let's just have a nice dinner. It's Memorial Day weekend. We're family." I watched her, and the pity I'd always felt for her simply evaporated. In that moment, I understood something I'd never allowed myself to see. My mother wasn't confused or helpless. She was an addict. She was addicted to the fantasy of a perfect family, and she was willing to sacrifice anyone to preserve that delusion. She never paid the price herself. She taxed the quiet ones, the good ones, the children who wouldn't scream. She sacrificed our dignity to appease the monster because Vanessa was the only one who threatened to burn everything down. Patricia would let Marcus bleed if it meant keeping the carpet clean. "Exactly," Vanessa said, emboldened by our mother's defense. She leaned back, swirling her wine smugly. "He's too sensitive. Cassandra coddles him. I'm teaching him how the real world operates." That was it. The final thread snapped. My father Thomas rose from his chair. He didn't move quickly. He rose with the slow, groaning weight of an ancient structure finally surrendering to gravity. He walked to the fireplace mantel, where a decorative wooden plaque hung with the words, "Family Forever," carved in elegant script. He stared at it for a long moment, then turned to face my mother. "You wiped the table," he said. His voice was dangerously low. The rumble before an earthquake. "You didn't check on the boy. You worried about the wood stain." Patricia froze, a wine-soaked paper towel dangling from her fingers. "Thomas, stop being ridiculous. You're trying to keep the peace," he interrupted. "But there is no peace, Patricia. There's only silence, and I'm done paying for it." He looked down at his left hand. His gold wedding band sat tight against his swollen knuckle. He'd worn it for 42 years. He walked to the kitchen sink, pumped dish soap onto his finger, and began working the ring off. It was painful to watch, the grimace on his face as he twisted and pulled until the metal slid over his joint with a wet pop. He walked back to the table. He held the ring over the puddle of wine, still soaking into Marcus's ruined painting, and he dropped it. It landed with a dull thud, splashing crimson droplets across the white tablecloth. "I'm done keeping your peace," he said, "and I'm done protecting you." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the oxygen from the cabin. My mother stared at the ring sitting in the wine like it was a live grenade. Vanessa laughed a sharp, nervous bark of a sound. "Dad, are you having a stroke?" She scoffed, though her eyes were darting frantically around the room. "It's a painting. You're going to divorce Mom over a $6 watercolor set? That's pathetic." Thomas didn't look at her. He didn't look at my mother. He walked to his travel bag in the corner, unzipped it, and pulled out a thick, black, leather-bound notebook. It was old, the spine creased, the edges worn soft from handling. He set it on the table with a heavy thud. I've been a forensic accountant for 38 years, Vanessa, he said, his voice calm, factual, utterly terrifying. My job is to track discrepancies, to find the cracks before the structure collapses. I track failures. He opened the book. The pages were filled with his handwriting knit, precise, meticulous columns of dates and figures. 3 years ago, he continued, running a finger down the first page. You told me you needed $8,000 for a business investment. You said your social media career was taking off and you needed new equipment. Vanessa crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Yeah, and I paid you back most of it. What is this, an audit? An audit is exactly what this is, Thomas said. But that's not the point. The point is, I started tracking everything. Every time your mother said she needed extra money for groceries, every withdrawal for home repairs that never happened, every dip in our joint savings account for emergencies. He turned the book around so Vanessa and Patricia could see the columns. I tracked the dates. I tracked the amounts. And then I hired a private investigator to track where the money actually went. Patricia made a small, strangled noise. She reached out a trembling hand. Thomas, please don't do this. Not in front of everyone. Everyone needs to hear this, Thomas said. Because everyone has been laughing at Cassandra. Everyone has been laughing at Marcus. Everyone thinks they're weak. But they aren't weak, they're the ones paying the bill. He looked at me then, and his eyes held a deep, aching apology. I let this happen, Cassandra. I let you think you were less than her. I let you think she was special, and you were just there. But I was watching. I was counting. He turned the page. Taped to the paper were bank transfer receipts. This isn't an allowance, Vanessa, he said. This is a ransom. Thomas looked down at the ledger, his finger tracing a line of red ink. August 16th, 2 years ago. $11,000. You said it was for a branding partnership buy-in? April 7th, last year. $7,000. You said it was for medical bills. He looked up, meeting Patricia's terrified eyes. But the biggest one was 4 years ago. The night of the Thanksgiving party we didn't attend because you said you were sick. Patricia was shaking her head frantically now, tears streaming down her face. Thomas, stop, please. Think of the family name. Thomas's voice rose, cracking with a fury I'd never heard from him. You didn't protect the family name. You protected a criminal. He turned the page. This time, there wasn't a receipt. There was a copy of a police report. $174,000 wasn't for business loans, Vanessa. It wasn't for gifts. It was hush money. Vanessa froze. Her arrogance evaporated, replaced by sudden, stark terror. She looked at the door, but she didn't move. 4 years ago, Thomas said to the room, Vanessa drove home drunk from a party. She hit a parked car, and then she hit a pedestrian, a 19-year-old college student walking her dog. I gasped. The room spun. I remembered that time. Vanessa had been traveling for a month. My mother had said she was in Europe, finding herself. She didn't stop, Thomas continued. She fled the scene, hit and run. Patricia was sobbing into her hands, her body rocking back and forth. You took our retirement money, Thomas said, his voice shaking. $174,000. You paid for a lawyer to bury it. You paid a settlement to the victim's family to keep it out of civil court. You paid off the auto body shop to fix the damage off the books. You told me it was a parking dispute. You told me it was handled. He slammed the book shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You stole our future to cover up her crime, and then you let her sit here at this table and mock a 7-year-old boy for painting a picture. You let her destroy his work because you taught her that destruction has no consequences. He looked at Vanessa, who was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. You aren't a businesswoman, Vanessa. You aren't an influencer. You're a liability, and your mother is your accomplice. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a family myth dying. Vanessa tried to rally. She stood up, smoothing her expensive dress, trying to summon the arrogance that had protected her for 34 years. She looked at the ledger, then at Thomas, and scoffed. "So what?" she spat. "It was an accident. Mom helped me. That's what mothers do, they help. Unlike you." She glared at Thomas, her chin high. "You're just jealous because Mom loves me more. I don't need your money. I have my own brand, my own followers. I don't need this dusty old cabin anyway." Thomas looked at her with cold, detached pity. It wasn't the look of a father looking at a daughter. It was an investigator looking at a condemned building. "You have nothing, Vanessa." He reached into the back pocket of the ledger and pulled out a folded document. He placed it on the table next to his discarded wedding ring and the ruined painting. "This cabin is in my name. It was my inheritance from my father. Your mother's name isn't on the deed." He smoothed the paper flat. "You have 1 hour to vacate these premises. All of you, Patricia included. I'm listing it for sale tomorrow morning to recoup the retirement funds you stole." "You can't kick us out," Patricia wailed, her hands clutching her chest. "Where will we go? It's pouring rain." "I don't know," Thomas said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Maybe you can stay with the daughter you invested so much in." He turned back to Vanessa. "And regarding your own money, as of 30 minutes ago, while you were pouring wine on my grandson's art, I froze the joint accounts. I've reported the transfers as fraud, pending a full investigation. The bank has locked everything. Your credit cards, Mom's cards, the business account you funnel money through." Vanessa pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, frantic. She tapped her banking app. I watched her face crumble. The color drained away, leaving her looking gray and small. "It's declined," she whispered, and there it was. The illusion of power, the empty wallet. I watched my sister, the bully, the golden child, the success story shrink before my eyes. Without the financial pipeline from my parents, her status, her confidence, her entire personality evaporated instantly. She wasn't a powerful woman. She was a child in an expensive costume she hadn't paid for. Her power was never real. It was rented and the lease was up. "Your power was rented," Thomas said, echoing my thoughts. "And the landlord is closing the building." He walked to the front door and opened it wide. The storm outside had broken, rain pouring down in sheets, turning the dirt driveway into mud. The wind howled into the warm cabin. "Get out." Vanessa looked at Uncle Robert, who'd been laughing earlier. He looked away, suddenly fascinated by the floorboards. She looked at Patricia, who was just weeping, useless and broken, unable to save anyone, even herself. Finally, Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes were wide and wet, filled with sudden, desperate realization that she was completely alone. "Cassandra," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Tell him he's crazy. You can't let him do this to me. I'm your sister." I looked at her, the woman who had terrorized me for 3 decades. The wine stain on Marcus's painting. The silence my son had learned, the silence I was breaking. "You should hurry," I said, my voice as cold as the rain outside. "Traffic is going to be terrible." 7 months later, the light in our new apartment was different. It wasn't the dim yellow glow of the cabin or the harsh fluorescent glare of the old family house. It was white and clean, streaming through large windows that overlooked the city park. It was smaller than the home Thomas had shared with Patricia for 42 years, but it was peaceful. There was no walking on eggshells here. No heavy silence from the next room signaling an incoming guilt trip. No fear of the next explosion. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, watching them. Thomas was kneeling next to Marcus on a drop cloth. They were covered in sawdust. Thomas was teaching him how to use a miter box to cut wood for a custom canvas frame. "Measure twice, cut once," Thomas said, his voice gentle, patient, the voice of a man who no longer needed to shout to be heard. "Precision matters. If the frame is strong, the art is protected. Like this, Grandpa? Marcus asked, sawing carefully, his tongue poking out in concentration. Exactly like that. My mother Patricia was living in a small condo 2 towns over. She sent letters, sometimes long rambling diatribes written on expensive stationery, blaming us for ruining the family image, for embarrassing her at church, for being cruel. I burned them in the kitchen sink without reading past the first line. She was still trying to tax us for a piece that didn't exist. But we'd stopped paying. Vanessa was working retail at a mall kiosk, selling phone accessories. The fraud investigation had triggered a tax audit, and she was drowning in legal fees. She'd sold her car. She'd moved into a studio apartment. For the first time in 34 years, she was facing the reality of a life without a safety net. And the fall had been hard. I looked at my son. He wasn't flinching anymore. He wasn't hiding under the table. He was making a mess with glue and wood, and he was laughing. When he spilled a little wood glue on the floor, he didn't freeze. He just grabbed a rag and wiped it up, knowing no one would scream at him. I realized then that the price of this peace had been high. We had to break the family to save the people. We had to burn down the structure to preserve the foundation. It was a heavy cost, but looking at my father's relaxed shoulders, looking at my son's easy, unburdened smile, it was the best bargain I ever made. We had to break the family to save the people. Her power was never real, it was rented, and the lease was up. If you've ever had to break a bond to protect yourself, type freedom in the comments. Let's remind each other that we made the right choice.